In this lesson, we will talk about the concept of type erasure. This follows on the earlier lesson on generic, so if you haven't watched that, you should watch that one first. Right? So in that lesson, we had developed a generic class called generic stack, where we could use different generic types. You could have a stack of strings or stack of integers. Now we can define a generic without using any generic type, right? So you can declare it as follows: generic stack without the angle brackets, the identifier s, and you can use new generic stack without the angle brackets constructor. Right. What is happening in the background this is really equivalent to declaring a generic stack with the generic type of object, which is a super class of everything, right? And then you do have the angle brackets here, so then you get a generic stack of objects, right? The same is the case with array list. You can use an array list without giving a generic type, as follows, right? Without the angle brackets and without the generic type. A generic class used without a type parameter is called a raw type. So that's a vocabulary that we should learn. Now, if you do provide a generic type to define a generic class, the compiler, in fact, will use that information at compile time and erase it afterwards. So it would not be available at runtime. And this concept is called type erasure, right? The generic information is not available at runtime, right? So once the compiler confirms that the generic type information is safe to use, it converts it to the raw type, and that is what is used at runtime. So let's look at a concrete example. Let's look at this code right here where we have an array list with generic type strings. So it's an array list of strings. We have used a constructor to create it. Now we're adding London to it, and then we're retrieving the first element. By the compiler, this is translated to this code. Now it's converted to the raw type, and some casting is needed to make this code work, right? So for generic classes, interfaces, and methods, the compiler will replace the generic type with the object type. This is essentially this is what is happening here, right? So let's take an example of a method. So here, this is a generic method, when here E is the generic type. E is used as the type of the array that is being passed in. The compiler will convert it, right? It'll get rid of the E over here in angle brackets and use the object type here, right? And the reason it's okay, because all the type checking has been done, the code is deemed to be safe to use, right? So lastly, do note that if you see array list string in your code, that type only has meaning at compile time, and it becomes just array list without the generic type at runtime, right? So you can use an expression such as the variable list is instance of array list. That works, and that'll be true. However, if you try to do list instance of array list with the angle bracket, this is in fact illegal, because array list string is not available at runtime. It has been erased. That's the concept of type erasure. Now, a final concept is, because generics are erased at runtime, there are some restrictions on their use. For instance, you cannot create a new instance of a generic type. So for example, if E is your generic type and you have a variable named obj, and you're trying to create a new instance of it with a new E, that is not allowed. And the reason is because new is used at runtime to create something, but at runtime the type E has been erased, is not available at runtime, right? Similarly, you cannot create an array of generics like this, again, because E is gone by the time you get to runtime. But you can create an array of object types and then cast it to E, right? So because object is available, right, and this will be handled properly at compile time, so you will be fine, right? Okay. Also, exception classes cannot be generic. That is another restriction, right? All right, so that has been a lesson on type erasure, kind of an additional concept to the concept of generics. Thank you.